ask Bighorn Co-op to be our dealer. So that would be who you talk to for any pricing or anything as far as AgroLiquid is concerned. Tiger wanted us to talk about fertilizers, dry and liquid, and why use one or the other or both in conjunction. So we want to give you some information as best we can. It's not going to be a real long presentation, but we do want your interaction. If you have a question, you want to call us out and say you do or don't believe us, whatever, please raise your hand, because what did we talk about questions here a little bit, huh? You know, dumbest question is one they ain't asked, right?
Right.
So, Abe, I brought him from California. I asked him to come up and be a part of this. He's our agronomist for the West region. Everything kind of west of the Rockies is where he covers. So he was gracious enough to come and travel with me and put up with me for a few days. So we appreciate Tyler asking us to come and do this. So I'll turn the time over to you.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Good morning. I guess it's still morning, isn't it?
Morning.
Yeah, that's
Good day.
good day.
Good middle of the day.
AgroLiquid is based in St. John's, Michigan. We've got manufacturing facilities throughout the country. And the closest one to here is what, Goodland?
Yeah, for me.
Goodland, and then we have a depot in Billings. And so that's where we're at. We are all liquid, and what we do is we feed the plant. Not necessarily putting down lots of gallons to do some amending to your soil. And that's what we'll talk about, the differences and the beauties of the different fertilizers out there. 4 things that you need to know. Always start with a soil test. Do we always start with soil tests? Be surprised how many people I get the response, what's a soil test? And they've been farming for years. Okay.
They rely on their field guy instead of having knowledge of their own.
Yeah.
That seems to be a thing that we see a lot.
Yeah. So the soil test for us is foundational. You say, what should I put on my alfalfa? I will tell you, I don't know until we look at that soil test and talk to you about that, get some history. I mean, any advisor you have should be doing those types of things. We'll also talk about nutrient tie-up in the soil, the types of fertilizers for your soil, those conditions, and solubility equals availability, which equals plant uptake. Because our plants drink, they do not eat. All right, soil test. If you're familiar with this, I'm just going to go over some very basic things in the soil test that you can be looking for. Base saturation. This is just a soil test that I took out of New Mexico on some pecans. And so I just had to give you a set example, so that's what I picked. It seems to be a little bit quite similar to what you guys have around this area. If you look at it, your base saturation, ideally you'd like to be between 68 and 72% of your calcium in that soil. Am I speaking, you guys understand what I'm talking about? Somebody you do, hopefully, all of you. Okay. Magnesium's at 15.2. Let's see, right here. Potassium is 5.3%, and sodium was at 2.7%. A little bit on the high side, but not horrible. I've got stuff in California where we've got 18% sodium in the soil. Yeah, and they're growing crops. So if you manage it, you can deal with those types of things. Okay, ideally, we'd like to be here, 68 to 72, 12 to 15. You can see we're not too far off. Potassium, we're right there, 3 to 6%, and less than 2% sodium. Okay, pH 8.3, ideally 6.5, 6.8. But when you're dealing with some higher value crops, guys will do things there's things that you can do to lower that pH. But when you're dealing with some lower cash value crops, it's not always an option to do.
Is anybody doing anything to try and adjust their pH here? What are you doing to adjust, to try and drop your pH?
Elemental sulfur.
Are you seeing a difference in it?
Don't know yet.
Just getting started with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Do you understand what sulfur does in the soil?
Pardon?
Do you understand what sulfur is doing in the soil?
Nope.
Okay.
Clue.
Why they're telling you that is, one, you need to have the biology of that soil in there to help break down that sulfur, and beyond that, in the sulfate. And then what it will do is it will find the free lime, and it will also create gypsum out of that, but it will also turn it into sulfuric acid, okay, which will solubilize more calcium. And then that in itself lowers the pH of the soil. On pH, and this is, I didn't intend to do this, but I'll talk a little bit about it. When you're dealing with a pH number here, magnesium actually has a bigger effect on your pH than calcium does. Okay? And the reason I say that is magnesium affects it at 1.6 times higher than what calcium does. So if you've got high magnesium, let's say this was a soil that had 60% calcium and 25% magnesium at a pH like that, the factor that you wouldn't have a high number of your calcium and happen to get your pHs high is because your magnesium is high. That creates a very sticky soil, heavy soil, and you guys are dealing with CECs in the mid-20s out here.
What's that?
The CEC, the cation exchange.
Do you know what your CEC is?
Mine's about 18.
18, okay, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, but if you have high magnesium in that, that makes that ground very sticky. Okay, and that's when, California, we call that tall man's disease. You walk across the ground with high magnesium, and as it's wet, you get taller as it sticks to your feet. And you just go. So.
One point here, has anybody watched their soil tests and watched their levels? Have you seen your pHs grow over the years? Or are they staying about the same?
Mine's saying the same.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. One of the things I read the other day was we use so much nitrogen, urea, UAN, that has a tendency to try and drive your pH just, a little bit. So I wanted to see if there was a trend anywhere with what we're using for fertilizers. So.
Okay. And then, as a result of that, of your high pHs, you may end up with a decent amount of trace levels in your soil, but they're unavailable. Okay, the higher your pH is, traces, zinc, iron, manganese, things like that are much less available. And when you get that down, the pH down to 6.5 to 5.5, they're great, but on that, then your NPKs become less available. Okay, so what's going on in that soil?
That's kind of wishful thinking.
What's that?
That's wishful thinking in this country.
Yeah.
6.5?
Yeah.
That's why we
Yeah.
asked the question, what are you doing? Are you trying to mitigate?
Yeah.
I mean, it took so many years to get that level up where it's
Yeah.
at.
I tried some rock phosphate, there's some guys throwing gypsum on,
But gypsum's not gonna change your pH.
isn't it?
No, it will not change your pH. It won't raise it, but the sulfur in it counteracts the calcium, so it keeps you.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
nice.
so gypsum's not gonna do that. And another thing about gypsum is very, very low solubility of calcium that you're gonna get out of that.
So it's not
Okay.
available.
It's not available. It's there, but it's not available. Gypsum is 0.0024% soluble. That equals to about a pound and a half of soluble calcium per year per ton. That's expensive calcium if that's what you want to use it for. So there are other things that you could use that will do that. I'm not saying that this doesn't have a place for it.
Will the
We
rock,
had talked about that, we use it all
will
the
the
time.
rock phosphate help anything? You gotta.
What was the reasoning that you were told to do that? Why were you told
Will
with
it help?
calcium?
I'm asking, no one told me that would work. The gypsum I've been told would help, but I never tried it, I never did.
Yeah,
I have a friend that does.
yeah. Yeah.
Sure said it would lower
Rock
the pH.
phosphate for what, lower in pH?
Yeah, would it help any? Yeah.
No. No,
Try
and
to
you
dump
get,
it,
and
put
because
gypsum
it's
on.
rock phosphate, you wouldn't get much phosphate out of it either, because it's bound with the calcium that's in it.
We were told the gypsum would lower our pH, but I don't know.
Huh? I haven't heard that yet.
If it will, for what you're spending, you're probably not gonna do a whole lot.
Elemental sulfur would be more of a
Yeah, that makes more
active
sense.
pH
Yeah, Yeah.
adjustment
Where can you get that? Just,
from Tyler.
okay. Yeah.
There's some kind of a poke filled under a can.
okay, so now, if you're dealing with this and you're coming in and you're gonna start planting, when are you guys starting to plant, in April?
Depends on what we're planting.
Yeah,
Depends on the snow days.
yeah, so a lot of times, you're probably dealing with the snow and issues like that, and you're dealing with heavy wet soils, cold wet soils, and you go out there, you put down I'm gonna put down some 1152 or 1034 and put that phosphorus down there, boy, that's gonna work out great. Okay? The problem that you have with any kind of a phosphorus in cold, wet soils is the reason that they can get the numbers so high in a 1034 or 1152 is they have they call superphosphate. And what they do is they take that molecule chain and they pack them together, and that creates that higher number, and you put it out there. The plant only takes in orthophosphate, meaning one molecule at a time. So it has to break that chain apart. Okay, which is fine. The biology of the soil does that. When you go in cold, wet conditions, the soil the biology of that soil is slow. Okay, and then you also have calcium hypocarrier soils. Calcium and phosphorus love each other. And if any of you ever made the mistake of putting calcium and phosphorus together, you only do it once. Anybody ever done that? It turns into cottage cheese. It turns into goo. You'll one time is all it takes. And your neighbor can do it, and you'll learn that lesson with him. Because he will tell you how hard it was to get that stuff out of there. Okay? Well, the same thing happens in the soil. It goes back into phos rock. And the way that they get that apart is sulfuric acid. And I don't know if you guys have ever used sulfuric acid. It's dangerous. And, well, it's good for lowering pH in the water. It's good for killing your organic matter and eating a lot of things in your soil that you don't need, that really you do need, rather. But anyway, so it really becomes, when you're making that decision, what form of phosphate you're putting down or putting into that soil makes a huge difference. Orthophosphates, when it's cooler, that plant, because it's in a form that the plant can take up and take it up immediately, it grows those roots, gets that plant off to a good start. If you're going with a poly, something that's a lot of poly, and it's cold, it's going to get tied up and not be available to you. You go in June, July, soils are 68 degrees, biology is working. In about 3 or 4 days, that poly will be broken down by the biology of that soil, and that is a better place to use that type of phosphorus. Okay? Now, liquids on that, they'll run both. You can do the same thing with the liquid. But one of the things that most liquids do is they put in a good amount of ortho for that very reason. You can put it down in those colder, wet soils, and it works very well. Okay? So then what does the pH tell us about this? Well, when you are dealing with the pHs that we have out here, close to 8, high 7s, high calcareous soils, okay? Again, you throw that phosphorus out there, you throw out your dry fertilizers, a lot of it gets tied up because of that high pH. It's not available, okay? And so I'm trying to keep this much more agronomic than branding, but one of the things that AgroLiquid has done is it was designed for that Midwest farm soils. And that, okay, we want to put this fertilizer down so it doesn't get tied up. So that even if it's cold, we put it down there, that high pH, it's not going to get locked up with calcium. It's going to be available when the plant needs it, and go from there. And we do have the long chain, and that is the one that is protected. So the biology has an opportunity to break that down, and you can become much more efficient. So when you're doing that, really be aware of what's going on with your pHs. At a higher pH, your NPKs are a little bit more available, but your zincs, iron, coppers, manganese, all those things are virtually not available to the plant. A little bit, but you go out there and you throw it in the ground, it's worth about what you threw it down there for.
Not saying it's not gonna work, just doesn't work as efficient.
It doesn't work nearly as
It
efficient.
will work. I mean, you've
Yeah.
obviously seen it work before, so we're not
Yeah.
gonna say that it doesn't work.
No.
You just gotta manage your farm, your pH.
And that's when, if you're going through there and you put that foliar on there, that's when the liquid really comes into a great aid to you. A plant can still take it in, even though the pH in the soil's high, through the leaves, it can take it in, and traces are a great way of doing that. So here's this graph, and this is, I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. This kind of tells you where the sweet spots are with your pH. And that's 6.5 to 7.5. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, they're all available, but you can see where your traces are. And then when you start getting back up here, phosphorus has to get, pH has to get really high, and then it becomes available again. Potassium will still be there, sulfur will still work, so, but that really starts to drop off, and you can see where we are out in Wyoming, okay? And what's going on, it's starting to become less available, especially this phosphorus. Okay? Commercial fertilizers, most of your dry fertilizers, because of that, putting down into conditions that aren't quite right, you can get about 15 to maybe on the high side, 30% available with your dry fertilizer compared to what you can do with liquid.
Has anybody heard that before? Of how efficient dry fertilizers are, or commercial fertilizer? So there's a company out there called the International Plant Nutrition Institute. They publish a lot of data regarding fertilizers and how plants take in fertilizers and other nutrients in the plant or in the soil. But they're the ones that publish this information, that it's 15 to 30%. That's why you have to put so much out there to get that 15 to 30%. Now, it's assuming your soils are in that 7 to 7 or 6.5 to 7. That's when you get your 30%. Even the liquids are the same way. But you've got to understand that what you're putting out there has to be available. That's why something protected, whether it's AgroLiquid or another product, if it's protected from tie-up, now you get a lot higher efficiency. So that goes up to 70, 80% available, which is a big difference. You manage your money a whole lot better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure you understood that.
One of the things that we have, that have helped potato growers up in Washington and Idaho and those areas there is because of that high efficiency, we're able to get their planter seed and their fertilizer to match each other, so they're not having to stop to fill up on more fertilizer before their seed runs out. They're able to get that going, and what does that do? It saves them thousands and thousands of dollars, whereas the guys are farming 20, 30 pivots at a time on application costs. So if you're having to run this or apply it manually through equipment, sprayers or whatever, inject it that way, that's a big cost that could be added to this. The other big difference between dry is you can't run through your pivot, obviously. Okay, liquids you can, or through any other irrigation system that you may have.
If I may,
Yeah.
going back to your comment about that 15 to 30%
Uh-huh.
available. I heard it a different way in that, you know, you put fertilizer down now because next year it'll be more available, and the next year will be more available.
A dry fertilizer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was kind of how I looked at that. What's available now? Well, it may not all be available now, but it is for the next year because it's kind of banks.
You will retain some of that for the following years. You're building that soil profile. You're trying to put as many nutrients out there. We're not saying don't use dries.
Right, well,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of going about what you
Correct.
said. That's how I see what you're saying with the only amount that's available.
Today,
Right, but
or for
then
this
next
growing
year,
season.
more of that, what you put on this year is gonna be available the next year.
Yep.
The following year, till that's put up, but you're still putting on something every year to keep that banked
Yeah.
to some degree.
But if
Yeah.
you take and you start managing that application, you might be able to say, okay, you know what, instead of, I'm just gonna throw a number out here. Instead of using 200 pounds, I'm gonna use 150 pounds. I'm gonna cut that back, I'm gonna save a little money, and I'm gonna find something in a liquid fertilizer, whether it's ours or somebody else's. I'm gonna feed the plant and let the plant take just what it needs from the liquid rather than trying to rely on waiting for it to break down, be there for next year. Does that make sense? Because we're not gonna mine it, we're gonna leave it there, we're just feeding that plant. So, any other questions?
Is there a certain amount of volatility in leaching? You're gonna lose a lot of that banked as it starts converting to the more leachable and more volatility. You start losing a lot of that. You put it on, but you lose it to the environment.
Nitrogen,
Nitrogen,
Nitrogen
yes.
is one, but
Nitrogen,
you could
but,
lose
yeah.
phosphorus, you could lose potassium as well.
no, it will not gas off.
Some, it'll leach.
It'll leach,
It
it
will
won't
leach,
gas
it'll
off.
leach, but not gas off. It will not gas off like a nitrogen will.
I understand.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, now, one of the things about potassium, okay? Let's say that soil test came here and it said 2%. You said, okay, we need to build that bank up in the soil to try to get up to 4%. One, I would not use a liquid fertilizer. It'll cost you too much to do that. Liquid fertilizer for AgroLiquid, and I would say that for most everybody, with maybe the exception of nitrogen, because UAN 32, you can put that in the liquid. But you do that to feed your crop. Okay? To do the heavy lifting, that's where the value is. Now, there are caveats to that. And one of the biggest ones is, if you're going in there and I don't know, does anybody have a low potassium level in their soils?
I can't remember.
2%, 3%, you want to bounce it up? Well, anyway, then we'll talk hypothetically. Let's say you're at 2%, you're going to 4%, but you've got a pH of 8.3. I don't care how much commercial fertilizer you put down, you are not going to bump that number. You are going to piss away, sorry, ladies, you are going to waste a lot of money on that.
Gets
Okay.
away.
And the reason
He's
is.
a California guy, what do you do?
Yes.
It is. The reason is there's not enough the cation exchange sites on your clay are full. So it will go and it will leach through and it will get tied up. Now, if you come in with manures, compost, things like that, that's a different animal. That will build it. So if you're saying, I need more potassium, think about changing that. Don't go, hey, I'm gonna go in there with 0060, or I'm gonna come in with an SOP and throw a bunch down there and it'll be good. It will not. It'll be very difficult. You'll spend a lot of money. You'll get some potassium out of it to be available. But you're better off spending that money on something that's gonna build that number up to where you want it to be.
You know, that's a great question about leaching volatility. It's something we gotta manage. Now, how many of you are corn on corn? Are you tilling between crops? That's where you'll lose a lot to volatility. As soon as you turn that dirt, you're gonna lose some. But if you stay corn on corn, you strip till or you no-till, whatever that practice is gonna be, you will keep most of that in the ground. As far as nitrogen, I don't care what you put out there, you're gonna lose some.
Yeah.
Whether it's our stuff or anybody else's, you're gonna lose
Well,
some.
there's a lot of wind around here and the sun is intense, so,
Yep.
I mean. it's
You're
hard to hold
probably,
that.
especially at nitrogen, 50%.
It'll respirate, it'll go.
It'll go away on you. Yeah. Nothing you can do about it, you're not doing anything wrong. There are inhibitors that you can put on it that will help that, okay? But that's a double-edged sword. Inhibitor makes it a slower release. And if you're growing corn and you need that nitrogen now, you can get a little bit, make you pucker a little bit till that nitrogen finally gets released. We have that all the time with we have a high energy in, and it is a slow release nitrogen, okay? And when corn growers are out there and they want to put that shot of nitrogen on there and they need it now, well, let's say May 1st, I need it in May 1st. We're telling them, maybe the first week in April, we'll start thinking about putting that on there. So that when they need it, it's finally released and starts to go, okay? So those inhibitors and things like that are good, but be aware of it. You might have to manage it a little bit differently.
Tyler, do you sell Super U or Agritane or anything?
No,
Okay.
no.
Just curious.
On the dry, it's all ESN.
ESN, great product. ESN's a great product, but it's a protected product,
It is.
right?
Yeah.
So why would they protect it? Why would they put protection on that ESN? Why is it so important?
To keep it from going away, so we're typically in that situation mixing it 50-50 to where you've got some nitrogen up front, and then that's gonna be sitting there for the laters.
Yeah. See, so that's what we're talking about, is having a fertilizer, whether it's liquid or dry, something protected to keep these high pHs from taking advantage of your nutrients that you're putting out there. You guys spend a lot of money on fertilizer. And so you want to make sure that it's the most efficient that it can be. And that's what we're trying to teach a little bit today, is just using the right fertilizer for the right time and the right crop.
Yeah. You've all heard of the 4 Rs, right?
Nope.
Right rate, right place, right time,
Right source.
right source. Okay?
So does the high pH tie up nitrogen too? No.
No. No,
It doesn't.
no.
It'll just make it more volatile.
That'll make it more mold.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only when it's on the surface.
Surface, yes, even in the, but, yeah,
If you-
But also understand that in the soil, that, as that nitrogen is changed into the ammonia, an ammonium form, it becomes gaseous, and it will leach right out of that soil. Okay? So that's why we do, when I say.
it still works. It still
It
works.
still works.
But you just gotta, like I say, it's all about managing, and that's what we're kinda helping you understand today, is it liquid that's the best for nitrogen at the right time? Or is it a dry that you bank, you know, down the road? ESN's a great product, cause it won't, it protects against volatility and leaching, right?
And that's why with your nitrogen specifically, if a grower can go through there and put multiple applications, smaller amounts on at a time, you're gonna help alleviate that gassing off, leaching, that wasting of it, okay? And the nice thing I like about that too is you're going through there and you're putting, now let's say, you're getting it once a week, you're running it through the pit and you put your nitrogen down. Well, you can pull some tissue tests. And if they tell you get to the point where, hey, normally I cut off my nitrogen at this point, you know, or in a couple of weeks, I'm in really good shape. Maybe I can back off some of that nitrogen and save that money. Instead of, hey, I'm gonna put 200 units out here right now, boom, did it need 200 units? Can that soil hold 200 units? If it can't hold it, it's gonna turn into nitrate form and go that way, right now. Okay, as long as it's in the ammonium form, it's a positive charge and it will connect, it'll stay on the clay calorie and not leach out. But the biology will break that down and quickly get it into a nitrate form. How are we on time? Okay. Liquids tend to be lower in salt index and safer for seed bed and planting. So, you know, a lot of stuff they'll tell you, don't put it, if you're gonna put that in the bed, 2 by 2, stay away from that seed and get away from it. A lot of liquids you can put directly onto the seed and not worry about that thing getting burned from sodium or getting too hot, okay? Not all liquid fertilizers, okay? Know what you got, ask questions. With ours, because we do have a low salt index and it's very safe, a lot of things we can, but there are some crops we still go 2 by 2. We say, no, that's, no matter what you do, it's just too sensitive, stay off the seed. Liquids are easier to create mixes, okay? If you were to get your traces in there at the same time, and with your NPKs, it's easy to do that, whereas with dry, maybe not always the easiest thing in the world to do. And then many of the liquids you can use both on the soil and foliarly. Again, we go back to that salt index. If you get something with a high sodium salt index in that foliar, you don't want to put that on there. You can create a burn, and burn leaves and things like that. So you can, you just got to keep an eye on that. And we have some products, not because they are high in sodium, but we've made them for the soil, and we primarily use it, they're formulated to work on the soil more than they are in the. But we use everything we have got. The guys have put it on foliar, and it's worked pretty well. So I talked about solubility, availability, and plant uptake. Okay, plants drink, they do not eat.
Chew. They don't chew.
They don't chew.
They drink, they don't chew.
They don't eat. Okay?
They-
That way.
they
Well, they
eat.
eat, but
They eat.
they drink. They don't
Just helping.
gobble it. Okay?
It's an argument we have, it's just, what do you do?
Yeah, you don't like salesmen. Anyway.
Stinking salesman.
Yeah, stinking salesman. High analysis fertilizers, and we talked a little about 1034, 1152, it's usually 0060, 0050, chlorides. Have you heard guys warn you about chlorides in your soils? And like that, like a potassium chloride? If you don't have a high salt base saturation in your soils, I wouldn't be afraid of a 0060 or 0050, because chlorides will leach very quickly. They're already in the nitrate, they'll leach right through that soil, and the plant won't pick it up very much. If you have a sodium issue, over 2%, especially if you're dealing with the CECs you have, I'd be very leery. You'll create salt damage. And you may not see it, but you'll feel it in the yield. You'll feel it in your yield.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
We do a lot of farm shows, and we did a couple grow out boxes up in, does anybody go to the MATE show up in Billings? Does anybody go to that? What's that?
just years ago.
Okay, so we had a grow out box, and we put 1152, we put 1034, we put our stuff, and we put, you said 40 rock, right? So we put 40 rock, and you could watch barley roots go down to that prill, and it will go around the prill. It will pick one path or the other, okay? Ours, it will go right to it and go right through the middle of our fertilizer. Why is that? Anybody got an idea why it would go around that prill?
It didn't like it.
Why? Salt. Salt. That's what the problem is. Now, it has to wait. Now, we're talking, this is a fresh prill sitting right there. Once it breaks down, goes into solution, now the root will intercept it. It will go into it. But when you're early in the season, you've got that salt that he's talking about here. And high analysis fertilizer, there's just a certain amount of that. Now, the 1034O was a lot different as well. It would stay a lot closer to that placement of fertilizer. But the dry stuff, it just didn't want to take it right then and there. Now, again, we're talking soils that are probably in that 45, 50 degrees. We kept it kind of cool, so it wasn't really active. You can see it wasn't breaking down. Just talked about these things here in the orthophosphate, polyphosphates.
What's the long-term effect of adding the salt if you're using that high salt fertilizer over and over? Does that raise your pH?
No, well, yeah, it will raise
It
your
will raise a little
pH,
bit.
but one of the things that the plant looks at in the soil, okay, as long as it's, less than 85 degrees, you got pretty low humidity, you look at your field and hey, this looks great. It gets about 90 degrees, humidity goes up,
Yeah.
and then you can look at it and go, there's some things changing out here. The sodium is now starting to make its effect. What it's doing is that plant is coming in there and saying, potassium is what controls the opening and closing of the stomata on the leaf, okay? Controls the respiration and cooling of that plant, right? Okay? So it does that. So it looks down, it says, it's hot, I need to get me some potassium in here and regulate this temperature, okay? Same reason we drink Gatorade. Okay, they say when it's a hot day, you drink Gatorade, it's the potassium that's in there, and it's a salt. But Na salt that's in there is very, very close to it, and it's much easier for that plant to grab that sodium than it is the potassium. And if it's higher percentage in that soil of sodium than potassium, it's going to grab that sodium and up it goes. What does that do? Potassium is what builds your cell walls in your plants and holds the trigger pressure of that cell wall. If it's made out of sodium, it cannot hold the trigger pressure that it needs to, and it explodes. And when you see that, you see the edge of your leaf getting burned from sodium, that's why. It explodes, it dies. Okay? And that's why you need to do that. Once you get to that point, show's over. It's already happened, it's what it is. So you've got to be proactive and make sure that that plant has potassium in it so that it can be picky on what it pulls out of that ground. It's not going, I call it a panic mode, but plants don't panic, but it goes, hey, I need this, and takes it, especially that hot spell, come in quick, and the humidity goes up. So you just gotta be careful with those things. We talked a little bit about orthophosphate and polyphosphate, the differences there. You need me to go over that again, a little bit more detail on this?
We don't have much time, so we can
Okay.
ask questions.
We'll keep moving, so.
You got 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so a higher analysis doesn't make it available, and that's why what we're doing, to get these numbers here and here specifically, they're using a polyphosphate, a super polyphosphate, and that's what drives those, you can get those numbers up, they're great, you can put a little bit of fewer pounds down with it, but if you have high calcium, high pH, low biology in that soil, poly's might create a little bit of a problem for you. It may not be available like you want it to be, like being orthophosphate. Okay. I haven't really talked much about the biology of the soil. As farmers, we're growing a nice, beautiful crop on top, but as stewards of the land, we're also taking care of what's in that soil. And there's live critters in that soil. Every time we go over and we kill a bug, we put pesticides down, they're not, it's like for ourselves, and we have a cold, the doctor gives us a broad spectrum antibiotic, okay? It's great, but it kills a lot of other things that we need in our bodies. The same thing happens in the soil. Fungicides, high sodium fertilizers, a high amount of phosphorus or any fertilizer, you've created it's the equilibrium of that soil is changed, and the biology will go, what are you freaking doing to me, dude? Okay? So that's really important that when you're doing these things, think about what's in that soil. Okay, if guys come out here and try to sell you live biology or things that'll help the critters in the soil, okay? Over in the Socialist Republic here, California, this is the mecca of these guys, okay? These guys all go out to the lagoon behind the dairy. Hey man, let's put this on there and see what happens. You know, they put it on there and yeah, it has an effect because their soil's almost sterile. But there are millions and billions and trillions of different bacteria and fungi and things like that in that soil, and we've identified a few of them in science that do things, okay? And we'll come out there and we'll say, hey, we're gonna put this down and it's gonna make the phosphorus more available, it's gonna make potassium more available, and that's great, that's what your soil needs. But you may have ever had one, your neighbor used it and said, this is the greatest stuff ever, and you do it and you're going, I'm not seeing anything. Why is that? One, you're growing different crops. You're farming different than he is. And that's what he needed. And that's not what you needed. So, what I would advise you when it comes to those types of things is kind of cut through the confusion. Do things that feed the biology of that soil and keep it going. Okay? When you take your corn down, things like that, you work it into the soil, that's really helping that biology grow. It eats that. It multiplies. It'll also take your nitrogen and use it until it breaks that material down. You know, what happened to my nitrogen? Well, the biology that's using it, once all that humus is broken down, it releases it, and it becomes available again to the plant and into your soils. So, one of the ways that you can do that, when you throw on some nitrogen, use a little humic acid with it. Okay?
Your Monty's is still sitting in the tank.
Yeah.
Just well use it. Or call Tyler and get his other stuff from it.
All right, why is this important? Well, it's kind of going back to the 4 R's. The correct fertilizer equals a good ROI. If you're using something that's getting tied up, you feel good about yourself at night. When you go to bed, you think, I've done everything I can, but if the plant can't get to it, it's the wrong fertilizer at the wrong time, the wrong source. Okay? Because if you pay double for a fertilizer that actually works, is that cheaper? That's cheaper. Because it's working for you, okay? The correct fertilizer is better for your soil. Your biology is gonna like that. It's gonna respond to lower lower sodium issues and things like that and building up, okay? The correct fertilizer saved application costs. Talked a little bit about that with being able to match your fertilizer in furrow with what your seed is, so you're not stopping to fill one or the other up, but you can coordinate them to get closer to each other. And then the correct fertilizer, less tie-up, better uptake. So yeah, if you get an orthophosphate fertilizer and you spend a little bit more money on it, again, if it's available and get picked up, it's cheaper. You can cut back on it. You don't have to put so much on it. Okay? Because you can look at it and go, how much is a gallon of that? Oh my goodness. But when you look at it per acre, wait a minute, we're really competitive with what we were doing, but we're getting a much better bang for a buck out of it. So, anyway, that's all I got. And if you have any more questions, fire away.
You guys all have different farming practices, you're doing different things. Come and talk to us if you got more questions. We'll work through each of your individual situations and try and figure something out for you.
Yeah.
Use Tyler. He's amazing with agronomy. That's why we chose these guys. So he can help you. Maybe you guys don't believe that because he's done something different. It sounds like he's had some interaction with most of you. But I put my trust in Tyler. So I know he'll do what's best for you guys on your farm. Not just trying to sell you something.
And what is the number one question any farmer should always ask?
How much it cost?
No.
Oh, take it.
Why?
Start.
Why? Just because you say this doesn't mean it's true. Check me out. You all got smartphones. Google it.
Educate yourselves. I love the sales guy, but educate yourselves. Then you know better, because you know probably better than what Tyler does on your farm. Maybe not.
Doesn't AgroLiquid have quite a bit of stuff on their website? different-
Absolutely. AgroLiquid.com. Yep, you can look
Go on
up.
AgroLiquid's website, you can spend hours looking at stuff.
Unfortunately, you can. That's a sickness, by the way.
Yeah, and one thing that the Bancrofts who own our company and Mr. Cook, when they started this back, our company back in 1983, is they said, hey, we've got to have data to back this up. You know? And so we've got it's now a 1,600 acre farm, and a lot of it's commercial that they have themselves, but there's 200-300 acres out of that we just do research on. And we go out there and we run it against different cropping systems that we have out there with different products. And then like where I'm at in California and with Bruce in Idaho, and we can even do that here, we'll do research out here. Okay, because nothing better than finding out, hey, you've grown corn in Wyoming and you've used Pro Germinator. Yeah, here's the data. And it's actually in Wyoming. I think that means a little bit more to you than it does if I say, hey, you know, the guys in Kansas, well, you know, I ain't in Kansas, pal.
Yeah.
You know,
Someday boy.
right? Okay, it's nice, but it's better than nothing, but, you know, so AgroLiquid spends a lot of money every year doing that research and wanting to show that and prove that. And so we've been doing it for over 40 years, and there's data there, all the research reports are there. You can just type in about any kind of crop you want, and we've probably done it. We're even doing coffee beans in Hawaii right now. So.
It's a great trip to go check.
I keep telling you, you need to take your agronomist with you, but no. They just got back yesterday. So anyway.
Thanks for letting us speak to you guys. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.